Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me. I am the Fuzz, and I'm here to entertain. So you may quickly notice that I don't have the camera today. Let's just say it's experiencing some slight technical difficulties, completely not caused by me dangling on the cord too much. Anyways, we'll just have to make do with this dignified little photograph. Anyways, now onto the big news. Spellweaver has finally launched. We've all been waiting a few months for this, and man, the developers weren't kidding when they said they were going to kick things up a little bit. So what I have before me is a list of all the cards that were changed in some way, along with the 6 new cards. We'll leave those for last. So without further ado, let's go over them. If you want to listen to the podcast that we had between the Ace Breakers, which was hosted by Jotto, the link will be in the description. So we will start with Order. Again, we'll leave the new cards for later. Touch of Light. It now puts a Might emblem on the creature instead of giving it +1/1 and Lifebound. Considerable improvement because it is now a permanent buff and not temporary. So much better than before. It's a nice buff, I guess. The card was kind of crap. Now, I think it's pretty nice. It's going to help soldiers mostly. I don't think angels are going to use this. Mostly soldiers or any aggressive or even maybe mid-range order deck. The thing about this card is that while it is a very, very good card, it is a bit low value because it's just 1 Might emblem and that's it. Now, that can be really good because it can help you get a good trade. So now, Order has a 3rd useful combat trick in addition to Guards, and Pacify. So that's cool. I like that. I'd say it's a fine change. Dwarf Spellbreaker. What the hell is this? This is technically not a new card. It's a card that replaced the Dwarven Musketeer, which was the 2-mana, 1 order, 2/1 ranged soldier. Also Dwarf Soldier. So this guy is also a 2-mana, 1 aspect Dwarf Soldier. Okay, that's fine. But he has a different effect. So he has +1 speed as long as the enemy hero controls a spell. Okay, cool. And whenever he deals damage to a hero, the opponent, I suppose if it dealt damage to yourself, it would still work, but that can't really be done. You destroy a spell that hero controls. This is not optional, but I'd imagine you'd always want to do this. So Order now has some anti-spell mechanics. Interesting. Yes, this is just the beginning of the rebalancing of spell and artifact removal between the factions. Now, 5 out of the 6 factions can deal with one or the other. Nature is still the king, of course, but with the exception of Dominion, all the factions have something. And this is one of them. There is another card Order has that also deals with spells. So, how do I feel about this change? I mean, they replaced 1 2-drop with another. Is this one better? It's probably not as good in combat because it doesn't have ranged. When it did, the Musketeer was able to kill off stuff like goblins and zombies. This guy is certainly fine, and if you're running soldiers, you will have to use it because you don't have very many good 2-drops to choose from. You don't really want to run the Cleric. It's just this and guards. But it's not bad, and if they do have a spell, sure, that's fine. So, cool card. Also really, really beautiful art. Griffin Rider. I'm kind of laughing here because Griffin Rider has seen, I think, a total of 3 very small changes so far. It started out as an absolutely abysmal creature, then it became slightly less abysmal, then it became still slightly less abysmal, and now it's this. So the latest change is they gave it ranged. Now, does that actually do anything? Well, sure. It's actually reasonably useful for picking off stuff. Putting ranged on a fast creature means that when it attacks, trying to block it with multiple creatures is much more difficult, especially if this gets buffed up. So, nice change. I don't think it's going to see play, honestly, but it's not just like a crap card like before. It's a lot better in Trials now. So I don't mind upgrading cards that were completely unplayable to just slightly below unplayable. So yeah, good change. Path of Transcendence. Now this is a card that I've kind of lobbied to change, and it's been changed kind of in the way I wanted it, but not exactly. So what is the difference? Well, it's 2 mana. That's good. That's pretty good. Now, the way it's different is, first of all, when Path leaves the field, and only when it leaves the field do you return everything. So you don't get to return stuff anytime. So in essence, everything can only be ascended once, because then the path goes away. Furthermore, the creatures come back exhausted with the Might emblem, so no more swift shenanigans. And the last trick they added is you can sacrifice it yourself to essentially trigger the effect, and you draw a card. So I think it's really cool. Is it better or worse than the previous path? Of course it's worse, but the previous path was just dumb and abusable. This one, less so, and I think it's just more generally playable. The main difference is you no longer have to leave a mana open to protect your creatures. Everything under path will always come back, because as soon as it leaves the field, and that includes by a landslide, because previously landslide was the only card that could get rid of it without bringing back the soldiers and whatever was under it. Now, it doesn't matter how you get rid of it, you're going to get the creatures back, so your creatures are safe. But you only get to ascend them once. You do only have to pay the 1 mana when you are actually able to, when you're ready to activate this. Now, an interesting thing you can do is you can just activate this at the end of your opponent's turn, and all your stuff will come back, and they'll be ready to attack next turn. So you can still set up some pretty nice counters with this card, but you can no longer just keep abusing battle cries over and over again. And that's good. I like the change overall. I look forward to experimenting with this card. Spellweaver. Now this was quite a buff to a card that I honestly didn't think was even bad. So the change is very simple. It's a 2/3 instead of a 1/2, and it can't attack. The can't attack is almost irrelevant, since when did you ever attack with a Spell Warden? The stat increase, however, is huge. With 3 health, it's actually a lot harder to kill. You can't use Noxious Fumes anymore, but furthermore, you can actually put him in the front, and he will block reasonably well, because he has an acceptably large body. He can trade well with stuff like goblins and whatnot. So this is a pretty big buff. I honestly think before it was kind of maybe you want to run this in Angels. Now I think it's auto include in Angels 4-off, because it's just really, really solid. And you can take a spell like Assassinate that might be able to kill it, which makes this guy ridiculously sticky. So I think I'm going to be running this in all my Angel decks, maybe even just some Order decks, because he's so solid. And if Namir ever, if the whole Knight Priest thing ever takes off, well, this Priest just got a lot better. And hey, Griffin Rider was a Knight, that got a little bit better. But we're going to need a little bit more synergy than just Namir. But on the podcast, Senelian argued that this is too much. The card is too good. And he may be onto something. Because 2/3 versus 1/2 is a humongous change. Like I said, I think it's an auto-include. This is somewhat balanced by the fact that it is 2 order aspects. So you can't really splash this card. And that's good. You should not be able to splash this Spell Warden. So really good card if you're running not necessarily mono order, but mostly order. And hey, maybe it's a reason to run mostly order, although that often just means Angels. Clone will be happy, right? Cool. I'm supposed to be mentioning Trials too. I mean, in Trials, if you're running at least double order, this is a great card in Trials. And Path as well. Namir's Blessing, all they changed here is just fix the wording. It just says blessed creature can't be chosen as a target for, whatever, instead of it can't be chosen as a target by the enemy hero, which was not very clear, so it just cleared up a little bit. Ray of Righteousness now has the ability to destroy an enemy spell. So Order has been given the spell removal aspect that Wisdom no longer has. Fair enough. I think this makes Ray of Righteousness really, really good, and basically an auto-include, because not only does it take care of big creatures, or even just medium-sized creatures, it now doubles as spell removal, so why wouldn't you want to run this, right? Especially since some of the new creatures they added are pretty large. I think you have to run at least 3, probably 4 of this. Is it a good change? I guess if you're going to put spell removal on something, you might as well put it on Ray of Righteousness. I think we're starting to approach an area in the game where there's some cards are just going to become staples, and I think this one's going to be one of them, because now it's just got a lot more useful. I don't really mind. It just means you're going to see it a little bit more often, and it means Order has more reliable spell removal. Fair enough. So that's it for Order. You know what? I'm just going to cover the new creatures as I go. And at the end of this, I'm going to rank them. We also rank them at the podcast, so this will just be a repeat, but maybe if you don't want to watch the whole 3 hours of it, because we took our time. The Valor Sworn Incarnates. These are all called Incarnates of some kind. This is the Order version, so it's a 1 mana, 1 cost. Its attack and health are equal to your Order level. So this just screams Angels, because Angels tend to run basically like 3 Order levels, 4 Order levels. So for Angels, this could be an easy 4/4. And honestly, I think it's trying to encourage a mono Order deck that maybe isn't necessarily Angels, because you can instill life 2 of these guys, and if you're triple Order, you're instilling 3 3s. That's really good. The card is quite dangerous because it's so cheap. Even though it's a 1/1 when you first play it, it becomes a 3/3 and a 4/4 later. So when you just draw it, it's a 4/4 for 1 mana. It's really good. For Angels, it lets you play it and still use your hero power. So this is on the higher end of the power level of the Incarnates. And it's one of the 3, I think it may be slightly over the top. But this one is the least over the top of the 3 that are. So maybe it should cost 2 mana. I don't know. I'll get back to this discussion when I start ranking them. So that was the Order Incarnate. All of them are rare, by the way, so they're not that hard to get. You don't have to spend like 600 shrines to make one playset. Wisdom. Let's kick it off with Sleep. This is just a small text change. Mostly it just says at the start of your turn, pay 1 mana if you can't sacrifice it. This is just meant to simplify the whole sacrificing energy, so that it isn't confusing, because previously it kind of was. So new players will understand exactly what this card does. Simple as that. Charged Aurite is back. So it now starts with 1 energy, just like before. I guess the devs decided that the Foundry Engineer opening is fine, because they did not nerf Foundry Engineers. So this is obviously quite a bonus to energy decks, because they can now play 4 of this, and it's really good. It works really well with other creatures, since after you play it on the next turn, it'll have 2 energy immediately, which means an extra Golem or extra shield from your 2 main cards, Protector and Engineer. So expect to see more energy decks, especially since the Incarnate is also really good for that. So yeah, we'll have to see if this is okay. I actually think the Aurite is fine. If anything, they could probably change the Foundry Engineers a little bit so that it doesn't spam golems like it does, because I do think it's a little bit ridiculous that it can spam as many golems as it can. But that's a topic for another day. There's the Incarnate. You know what? We're just going to do this in order. So health and attack equal to its energy, and it starts with 1. At the start of your turn, it gains +1 energy, just like a Titan. And then if it would be dealt damage, it instead loses that much energy. So this is Dust Titan Jr. Just like Dust Titan, it grows by itself. It's arguably more dangerous, because the Titan only gets +1/1 for each instance of gaining energy. This gains as much attack and health as the amount of energy. So if you use Force Wielder and spend 4 mana, this will get +4/4. My problem with this card is that it's so cheap and can be played so early. If you play Charged Aurite turn 1, you could play this on turn 2, and your Aurite will transfer 2 energy to it, making it a 3-3. A 3-3 with 2 speed on turn 2 that grows by itself is insanely threatening. And I think that's too good. I think this should not grow by itself because it's way too cheap. Titan is okay to grow by itself. Titan costs 4 mana and is 3 aspects. So that is a late game creature. That's fine. This is a 2-drop. A 2-drop should not be this powerful. So that's just my take on it. Now, the last part where it says if it will be dealt damage, it loses that much energy. It's technically a downside because if it gets Firebolt, it basically loses 3 attack as well as health permanently. But here's the funny thing. Because it doesn't actually take damage, it only loses energy, there is no clause that says if this has 0 energy, it dies. It only dies because 0 energy means it has 0 attack and health. But if you give it a might counter, for instance, then it no longer dies at 0 energy and it becomes immune to damage. This creature is immune to deadly. It doesn't die due to deadly. It's immune to flash freeze other than the damage. And if it has a might counter, it will never die in combat because it doesn't take damage. Now, that's not actually as big of a deal as you'd think because it's not easy to give it a might counter, but it's just kind of silly. And I think they should remove the at the start of turn +1 energy and replace it with if this has 0 energy, sacrifice it. Because there's no reason why you should have an unkillable creature in combat, even though it's actually never going to come up. Gnome Power Engineer. Oh, baby. So, one of the bigger nerfs, this guy no longer destroys spells. The spell destroying capability was instead given to Order. Fair enough. He only destroys artifacts, and if you do, you give an allied card exactly 2 energy. The energy change is rather minor, but it does mean that you don't destroy Helms of the minion and give something 4 energy, because that was kind of dumb. So giving just 2 is fine. You can destroy your own stuff if you want to, although it is a bit more limited now because you can no longer destroy your own force fields, for instance. You'd have to destroy your own golems or something, so that's a lot less useful. And overall, the card is just a lot worse. The whole idea of splitting the removal of artifacts and spells is kind of a sticking point with me, and I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. I think it might not be the right decision because it makes these cards very, very situational. Because, very few decks actually use both artifacts and spells. Usually some decks will use either spells or artifacts. So now you only counter half of them. I understand that it had to be changed, but again, my suggestion was just to make it draw a card for the person who destroyed the artifact, whose artifact or spell was destroyed. But we'll have to see. It does mean Wisdom can no longer counter spells at all. So they have no answer to things like Force Field, hilariously, or Electrostatic Storms, or Grand Reunions, or whatever. It had to be done, but I'm not sure this is the right way. But we'll have to see. Djinn of Wishes. It was given 5 health instead of 4. I'm not sure why they thought this needed a buff. I mean, it was only played for the effect of looking for spells. I suppose you could splash it in now. I mean, 5 health is a lot. It's not easy to kill, but I don't think it's going to make it get played anymore. It's just going to make it played... It's just going to make it better in the decks that played it, which was mostly spell-based Reflector decks. I am pretty indifferent about this change. But hey, it's a target for Kayanu. It's a 3/6 if you Kayanu him out. That's pretty funny, actually. Dust Titan now starts with 3 energy instead of 4, so he can't shock 2 creatures immediately. Surprising that they nerfed this card, but Titan can get really nasty. So maybe they didn't want you to be able to just double shock when it comes in, because that's pretty powerful. Considering the threat level that this card already poses, I mean, you could think of it this way. Charged Aurite has 1 more energy now. So you could play Charged Aurite and Dust Titan, and you break even. So I think it's fair. I think they wanted to counterbalance it somehow because they already gave 1 energy to the deck by buffing Aurite, and they gave them the incredible Incarnate. So yeah, I think it's fair. Again, I mean, except the Incarnate. That card's not exactly fair. Jorale's Silencer is back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the version that it was before they made it make other cards cost more. This is the one that was kind of annoying to play against, because especially if you played several, because it essentially forced your opponent to waste cards. It's what made like control games really, really lame. So we'll have to see how it pans out. Is it going to lead again to the same problems that we had before? I mean, it was changed for a reason, so we'll have to see. I was never a big fan of Silencer, but I did have a deck that used it, and it was actually kind of fun to play. But it can be really, really, really nasty, especially if you're low on cards. If you get Silencered, then trying to get through it is really, really problematic. Just because you can run 4 of them, and trying to, work your way, it's like you are not able to play anything. It's obviously a very powerful effect. It's 4 mana, 4 aspect, but because ramping exists in this game, I think, specifically New Horizons, which ramps you up levels, I think that may make this card over the top. We'll have to see. Watch out, guys. So that's it for Wisdom. Let's move on to Nature. The hero, Neva, hero power is now cooldown of 4 instead of 3. We should not be surprised that they did this. This was one of the strongest hero powers. Just giving everything swift for 1 mana is incredibly strong. Now you will probably not use it more than maybe 3 times in the entire game. So you have to kind of use it, strategically. Use it when you really want it, not to just get a little bit of extra damage. Generally, it'll still be pretty good. You can swift really big creatures like demons or something, and I think in that case it still works well. It's fair. It's a fair change. Word of Vigor. Ouch. So the change in this card is that the buffs are no longer permanent. They are temporary. So you get +1/1 on number of creatures up to your nature levels and then draw a card. That hurts the card quite a bit, but it's not unreasonable because Word of Vigor was tremendously powerful. Even just hitting 1 creature with it was good because it's just like Touch of Light, but you also drew a card, and it had the potential of hitting multiple creatures, and that's what made it really, really strong. Now this card will probably see a lot less play. Maybe not no play, but if you're playing aggressively, if you are playing aggressively, you're going to want to use Ambush Strike, not this. But in a mid-range battle, this could be useful. Giving 3 creatures +1/1 real quick and draw a card could have some use. But I'm not sure. Probably you might just use Landslides and Outbreaks. So this spell might see a lot less play. Maybe no play. Summoner Druid has 2 health instead of 1. I'm really not sure why they did this. I thought the card was perfectly fine. It doesn't really change much other than if you have 2 of them, Fire Blast won't kill them both. That's about it. And I guess on the front line it could be a little bit more useful. I don't know. I don't think it changes all that much. Venerated Unicorn. So just like the Power Engineer can no longer hit spells, this can no longer hit artifacts. The ability to destroy artifacts was given to Corruption. Now, Nature is still the king because they have Test of Time and Landslide, and to an extent Tornado Outbreak. So that's just fine. Unicorn is probably going to see less play, although during the podcast, Senelian disagreed with that sentiment. He thought it would see just as much play. But the reason it was played is because it was such a versatile tool. It was the ability to take care of a lot of threats, and if you played a deck that didn't have them, well, it's just a fine body. So it was basically an all-purpose solid card. Now it's much less useful of a counter. So if it doesn't counter that much stuff, if the meta isn't that spell heavy, you just aren't going to use it. You probably will just rely on Landslide if you need to remove some stuff. So I still think it'll see less play. Yeah, basically. Grand Reunion. Wow, this is one of the coolest changes they made. It's now 3 mana instead of 4, and that's good. Second of all, you now can only put into play a fairy, an elf, a plant, or a spirit onto the field, as opposed to a level 2 or lower creature. This is actually a very fair buff, because it lets you put things like Sunchaser Orite and Ancient Treant on the board, which makes sense, because those are the kind of creatures you would want to run in a control deck. And it also lets you use the Incarnates, all of whom are spirits. That could be a little bit iffy, but you can't use stuff like Karthus. So yeah, I think it's very fine change. With the mana reduction, I think Grand Reunion has a shot at being played, and that's cool. It's really never seen play before, and anything that makes a card playable but not overpowered is okay in my book. I actually look forward to trying to make a controlled nature deck. And lastly, the Incarnate. 3 mana, 3 aspect. Its attack and health are equal to the number of creatures you control. This reminds me of some creature from Magic the Gathering. I forget what it's called. Anyways, at the start of your turn, you may return a random creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Fair enough. So, it's a cool creature, but it takes quite a bit of work to get going. For the same cost, you could play a Sunchaser Orite, which is a 4/4 with 2 speed. So you'd have to have this and 3 creatures for this to be equal to the Orite in terms of stats. Now, the secondary effect is nice, where you get to bring stuff back. So if it does live, you get some card advantage. So this was clearly designed for sort of the control advanced Neva. You know, you play a lot of creatures, including this, and then you use her power to bring them back into your hand for more shenanigans. So it's going to fit into that deck and basically nothing else, because if you don't have a board, this card just sucks. So you might run 2 of them, maybe 3, probably just 2. Now the question is that deck actually going to be good? And that's another question we just have to see. Try to build a deck and see if it works. If it doesn't, well, Life Force Incarnate is gonna be really sad. This card is basically... That's actually potentially good in Trials, if it doesn't die. I know I wasn't mentioning Trials much, but whatever. Don't blame me. Flameborn Incarnate. This is the Rage one. 2 mana, 1 aspect, 2 speed. Its attack and health are equal to your opponent's levels. And it has, essentially, it's called Fire Breathing in Magic, I believe, where you spend 1 mana and it gets 1 attack till end of turn. And they even put in EOT. That's really funny. So it's based on your opponent's level, so don't expect it for this to get bigger than like 3/3. But a 3/3 with Fire Breathing for 2 mana is potentially quite threatening. The thing is, you don't want to treat this as a 2-drop, because it's not very good on turn 2. It's actually quite bad, because you will never have enough mana to use the Fire Breathing, and if you play it on turn 2, it's a 1/1. They're not going to go up in level. They might not even go up in level for another turn after that, so it'll just kind of do nothing. I think this card supports a more mid-range deck, where you're trying to get this guy on the board kind of a little bit later and see if he gets dealt with. Especially against control decks, it's a 4/4 for 2, which is quite good, with the Fire Breathing ability. Yeah, cool card, but again, it depends on whether or not Rage, that mid-range, or mid-rage if you want to call it, the mid-range deck is good. If it's good, this will make it better. It'll belong in that deck and make it better. If not, I'm afraid this card is just not going to see play. In Trials, it could be pretty good, but it's, again, should be treated as a mid-range threat, not a 2-drop. You're not going to be replacing Fia or the Fireworker with this card. Certainly not. Burning Rage. Oh my goodness. Huge buff to this card. You now only take 1 damage per turn instead of 2. Pretty big deal. It means Burning Rage could come back, but because a lot of its other components like Fireball and Ramgak are still what they are, you might need to try to build a different Burning Rage deck. Now, +1 Rage level is pretty good, and you draw a card every time you play a Rage spell. So this could ramp you up really quickly, and because you only take 1 damage, you have a lot more time to do this. It's like a very mild version of Dark Portal, not nearly as powerful, but quite good. You could actually play this on turn 2 and not be ridiculously punished. I like the change. I think Burning Rage, maybe with that Incarnate, could become a thing. quickly ramp to a red dragon or something. Although the number of rage spells that would work with this are a bit limited. You really only have Word of Fire, Fire Blast, Fireball, and Dragon Fire. So you're actually not going to draw that many cards. But this is a deck that needs a bit of tinkering. But I think if Burning Rage comes back, it'll be a different version than what Senelion played before, with the basic Despina, a lot of Dominion, and, you know, Vampirism and all this other crazy stuff. I like the change. I don't know if it's too good. It could be too good. I think it has the potential to become broken if, let's say, if there's one more really good cheap rage spell added, it could be something good. We'll have to see, but it's another card I look forward to experimenting. Ruination. You may be forgiven for thinking, wait, is this a new card? I've never seen it before. That's probably because you've never seen it before. I don't think I've ever seen this card played, ever. Maybe. Anyways, destroy all artifacts. Okay, I guess, but it's 4 mana and 2 rage. So it's supposed to counter a lot of artifacts, but really there's only 2 kinds of decks that run like enough artifacts to make this card even remotely playable. That's Energy Wisdom because of all their golems, and Reflector decks because you can destroy multiple reflectors and lamps with this, which will be absolutely devastating and will win you the game. Problem is, against every other deck, it's completely useless. And even against Energy Wisdom, even if you kill like 4 golems, that's basically like a limited Cataclysm. It's not exactly going to win the game. It might keep you alive longer. The biggest problem with this card is just way too damn expensive. And there is no destroy all spells. So honestly, yeah, this card was never played before. It's not going to start seeing play now. 2 rage and 4 mana. Who's going to run this card? No one. I mean, if you really need to destroy artifacts, Rage already has a bit better tools to do that. I mean, the only time you'd even consider this is if indeed somehow spell reflector decks became really dangerous and you might have to tack 2 of these in, but I'm not really seeing this. Oh, and of course, in Trials it's completely useless. It's just completely useless in general. Poor Ruination. This is technically a buff because it only destroyed up to 3, but realistically, I don't think I've ever... Okay, there may be a time where you could destroy more than 3, but usually if you destroy 3, that's enough. It's kind of pointless card. Maybe they'll make it better in the future. Anyways, moving on to Dominion. Ooh, there's a lot of changes here. Power Surge. If you have 5 or more mana crystals, after you gain the mana crystal, you draw a card. So basically, this was made playable. It's a legitimate ramp card. If you played early, you ramp, and that's good. If you played late, you just cycle. Perfectly fine. You can play 4 of this in a ramp deck of some kind, and it's basically on par with New Horizons. Yeah. Cool. It was pretty much useless before. It does mean Word of Power is pretty much complete trash tier at this point. Where before, you could maybe make an argument there was some amusing way to use it, but no. This card is what you use for ramp. It's kind of cool that there is now 2 aspects that can ramp legitimately instead of previously it was just blue. Now you have Dominion as well. Although, that might not be the best thing, and you'll see why. Power Lost Incarnate. Oh my god. I honestly think the developers they just dropped the ball on this one. I can't imagine how you could look at this card and not think it's anything but blatantly overpowered. So it's 3 mana and 1 aspect. Its attack and health are equal to your mana crystals. You know, the thing that increases every single turn and never goes down. And its speed is equal to your Dominion level. That means this creature can reliably hit 3 speed and be like a 10/10. That is absolutely retarded. My goodness. I'm just gonna close the argument on this card by saying it needs to be changed immediately. Because, okay, compared to the Wisdom one, when you play this as, let's say, a 6/6, every time you increase your mana, you're not only buffing this card, but every future Power Lost Incarnate you play. Especially if you play Power Surge, later on you could draw this and play a 10/10 3 speed creature for 3 mana. That's dumb. It makes every other creature worthless. This is ridiculous. Wisdom 1 requires some work. This requires no work. Increasing your mana is not work. And to add insult to injury, you could even go for a 4th Dominion level and give it 4 speed. Yeah, this card's just dumb. I think it has to be changed. Otherwise, people are just going to run it in every Dominion deck because you don't even have to have a lot of Dominion levels. You could play it as a 10/10 with 1 speed for 3 mana. It's good enough. Hell, it beats the crap out of Zombie Giant or basically every other creature. Just put an Overcharger on it and it's got Unstoppable. What are you going to do against it? It's dumb. It needs to be changed. Silver Blade Warrior is now a 3-speed creature. It was a 2-speed creature. That's a big deal. It's actually reasonable right now. It's a fairly decent 3-drop. Good. Yeah, you could legitimately consider playing it in a Dominion deck. Curve into this and then the Titan, the Thunderstorm Titan. Yeah. Cool. Also, it's going to be much better in Trials. Yeah, fine change. The card went from basically trash to reasonable. That's good. Blood-Seeking Mutant. Oh my goodness. So it's now 3 mana instead of 4. Wait, it's made cheaper. Okay, and it has 1 extra health. Okay. When it enters the field, it puts a weakness emblem on a non-vampire creature just like before. Now, this is where it's different. Whenever a creature with a weakness emblem dies, he gets a counter. So the difference is he only puts a counter once. So he isn't a self-growing persistent threat. He can still grow, though it's a little bit more difficult to grow him. The difference is he can come out a turn later, and if he kills something, he's a 3/4. A 3/4 that killed something. This card absolutely is going to crap on all forms of aggro by chomping elves and goblins and being a 3/4 body that can just efficiently block. That's a little scary. So it's a lot more powerful as an anti-aggro tool, and it's a little bit less powerful as a controlling tool because you can't really that consistently inflict the weakness counters with it. However, if you play a second mutant and that mutant kills something, the previous mutant will also benefit. Furthermore, Vampiric Touch is something that can inflict a weakness counter. And if you afflict a creature with a weakness counter through that and then later kill it, that's another buff. So Blood-Seeking Mutant is going to be very, very good card. Insane in Trials, for sure. Wow. Seems like Dominion just got a bunch of good creatures. Like their crappy 3-drop became decent. Powerless Incarnate is completely bonkers as a 3-drop, and now their 4-drop, their previously, now Mutant is a 4-drop. That's actually really good. So, are we gonna see like Mono Dominion tempo or something? Now, actually, we've already kind of seen it. Jodo was playing it and was doing fairly well with it just because you can curve out really well. And again, put an Overcharger over this guy, and I've disconnected for inactivity. Oh, it has been 45 minutes. My apologies. Back to business. Mutant. I mean, I've said what I said. It's going to be very dangerous anti-aggro. It's going to be just a good creature overall. I don't know. I suppose it's an okay change because it does mean it's less obnoxious since it doesn't just keep growing. But it starts at such a higher power level at 1 less mana and 1 more health that might be enough to just make it better. I don't know. We'll have to see, but it's looking really strong. Helm of Dominion now costs 2 Dominion instead of 1. That means we're going to see it less often, and that's a good thing. I still dislike this card, but now I'll see it less. Bloodwell Matriarch now only costs 1 purple aspect instead of 2. That's cool. That means you can kind of splash it in some decks. I like that, actually. I think the card is really cool. You could even consider running it in a Wisdom Energy deck, right? Yeah, maybe. They don't need 2 blue for anything, except Lamp, I guess. But they might play 3 anyways if they want to play Lamp. I mean, not Lamp, Titan. So it's something. This uses energy. That's cool. I like the change. Vampirism is back to its old self, where you lose 1 life for each creature you control. That means if you have no creatures, you don't lose life. So that's pretty good, because you can gain a ton of life with this. The previous version, when you always lost 3, was basically unplayable, because if you didn't have a board, or if your board got cleared, you just died, because you took 3 damage every turn. That was just a death sentence. The reason it was changed to begin with was because the Lamp of Zephyr has a really stupid interaction, where if you become the creature, it gets buffed and gets lifebound, and it's really dumb. A 5/4 with 3 speed and lifebound is retarded. And because it becomes a lamp at the end of the turn, you don't lose life for it. So very abusable with lamp. But I don't think it's necessarily going to make a comeback. We'll have to see. I never thought Vampirism was that obnoxious. Vamp Lamp I don't think is really that ridiculous. But we'll see. Maybe I just haven't experienced enough of it. Drayla now is 2 purple aspects instead of 1, so it's the flip side of Bloodwell Matriarch. That doesn't really make any difference. You never splashed it anyways. But it's now a human and not an elf. Why? Most likely because of Grand Reunion. They don't want you to be able to get this out with Grand Reunion. That's probably it. It's not going to make that much of a difference, but it's just probably them covering their bases. Fair enough. Lord Karthus, the Game Breaker, has been nerfed yet again. So, when he enters the field, destroy an enemy creature with 4 attack or less. Very interesting. So he is no longer a counter to big creatures, only small ones. That's perfectly fine, because this is a faction that has, Cataclysm. It has Helm. It has, Devious Plot. And Drayla. So that seems pretty fair. Now Karthus is no longer the be-all end-all creature, and he is no longer a design restriction on future big cards. So I like the change. I think he's pretty cool. Not ridiculous, just good, really good. And that's fine. I like the change. It's still going to be ridiculous in Trials. And now we go to Corruption. 1 card slipped away. There we go. 3 changes and 1 new card. So, first of all, the Herald of Despair. Same as before, but has gained a new ability. You may sacrifice it for 2 mana, and each hero sacrifices an artifact. Now, this makes Herald very interesting, because now, in addition to, dealing with your own portal, while being a counter to energy-based decks, he can now counter things like Helm, things like Lamp, maybe other dark portals. And because that's each hero that sacrifices it, you can use him to sacrifice your own dark portal if you don't want to just reset it, or if you need to play it to reset something else and then sacrifice it to get rid of your portal. So a big buff. I think Herald now is basically a really good card. Demons have to run this now. I don't see why they wouldn't. Now the funny thing about Demons is that they're going to run 4 of this guy, but they're not going to run Unicorn, because Unicorn cannot destroy Dark Portal anymore, which makes it completely useless. So that means you might not even use Nature in Demons anymore. You still could, because Landslide and Outbreak are still phenomenal cards. And being able to give your Demon Swift is good, but not sure if it's worth giving up Consume Spirit, which is nasty. And yeah, kind of giving up Restless Tombs. Not really. It's a different demon deck, but whereas before I liked the Nature version, I think I'm going to switch over to just a strictly Corruption version. So yeah, I like the change. It becomes a much more flexible and versatile card. Cool. Hands from Beyond is back. Okay, cool. It's 2 mana and 2 aspects, so it's a little bit better costed. It's probably still not going to see play, but it's quite a bit better in Trials now. Picking it is not so bad. This is one of those cards where it's really annoying if it stays, but doesn't actually hurt your opponent too much. It helps you trade on the board if you have a board and your opponent has the board, but I don't think Corruption is going to run this. I would much rather just play like a Ghoul instead of this. But at least it's a little bit better, so that's fine. Tombs of the Damned has been renamed to, well, Tombs of the Damned. It was Restless Tombs. Fair enough. And now, the only difference is you now also get a zombie if this leaves the field. So if you play it, you get a zombie, and if it gets hit by Unicorn, you get a second zombie. Or if you just play a second Tomb of the Damned, the first one will leave, but will leave behind a zombie. So it's just been buffed. It's not only more resilient, but it's easier to run more off. So expect to see this card more in Corruption because, I mean, it's basically risk-free. You're guaranteed at least 2 zombies, and that's good. I think even Demons might run it now because a lot of zombies means Enoch can get some value. So yeah, it's a buff without making it ridiculous. It's still not as good as the previous version, the original, which cost 2 mana and wasn't legendary, and you could get like several on the board, and it was just dumb. Cool change. And the last card, Deathbound Incarnate. This is probably the coolest designed Incarnate of the bunch. So it's 3 mana, 2 aspects, and it deals damage to the hero in the form of decaying cards. So they mean milling. If it hits you for 5, you mill 5. Okay, weird, right? His attack and health are equal to the number of creature cards in your opponent's graveyard. So that means the more you mill, the bigger he gets. So the card was very obviously designed with mill decks in mind. Right? You mill a few cards, he comes in, let's say, as a 4/4. That's already a pretty nice body. If he gets a hit in, he mills more, and he could quickly become bigger and bigger and bigger. The reason why this is not overpowered, not at all, is because, first of all, it's not going to be as big as, let's say, the Dominion Incarnate, but more importantly, it's not going to kill you in one hit by hitting you for like 12. You'll decay 12, but decaying 12 doesn't actually put you closer to losing. So I think it's pretty nicely balanced, actually. But it will obviously only see play in mill decks. It might be okay in trials because of the smaller decks, actually. But in that case, you would not pick more than like 1. Are mill decks going to be viable? We'll have to see. They will definitely use this guy. Obviously Vultures, obviously Flash of Delirium, and I guess Nightbringer. Yeah, sure. See if you can actually mill enough. If you can get a hit in with this guy when he's really big, that might just be enough to put him over the edge. I like the design. We'll have to see if let's see if it works out. Anyways, that's it for all the cards. Man, we've been talking for quite a long time. Now, I said I was going to rank them in order. The Incarnates, I mean. So we're going to do exactly that right now. The ranking on the podcast was essentially almost exactly the same as my own. So we're just going to go over it real quick. We voted this one to be the weakest just because it requires a deck to support it and is kind of win more. If this card is so big that it's threatening to kill your opponent, that means you already have such a big board, you'd probably be killing them without it. If this card was unstoppable, it'd be really interesting, but it's not. The ability to get cards back in your hand, that's fine, but it just means it's kind of like a support creature. I still like the design, but it's not nearly as dangerous as the other ones. Then number 5, we put the Deathbound one because, again, it's not that dangerous. It's cool design, but it's balanced, unlike the ones above it. Number 4, and I think they're kind of the same, you know, the Corruption one and this one, is the Flameborn. Cool card, but again, manageable. Because it only gains attack, it can always be removed by Fireball. It can always just be blocked. So it's completely fair. So, yeah. So those are the 3 that were not unbalanced. Now let's go to the not so balanced ones. Now, number 2 and 3 in our podcast were tied. 2 of us voted for Order, and 2 of us voted for Wisdom. For me, Order is number 3, because unlike Wisdom, it has a cap of 4/4, and while that's still really good, it's late game, and it can't become that big quickly, unlike the Wisdom, which can become, you know, very big very quickly, and it can grow well beyond 4. That's why I put this guy at number 2, because just how powerful he can become. But he's not number 1 because he actually requires work. Unlike this guy, who not only can get the 3 speed, which is faster than any other Incarnate. By the way, I think the Nature one should have 3 speed, not this one. He can even get to 4 speed, and he can become a huge body, while all your other ones are also huge bodies. It doesn't require any work. You could just top deck him and play him, and he's a 10/10 if you have 10 mana. Absolutely ridiculous, completely brainless card, that you basically have to run heavy removal to deal with. Very not fun card to play with. I don't know what they were thinking. So my suggestions are the following. This guy, make him 3 speed. I think that'll make it a pretty interesting card. This one, I think, is fine. Yeah, this one, I think, is fine. We may have to see if he needs a cost reduction depending on how good the whole milling thing is. But at the moment, I think he's fine. This one, I think, is fine. It doesn't need a change. Order one, I would argue maybe make it 2 mana to play. Not sure quite yet, but let's face it, it's a bad 1-drop, so you wouldn't even want to play it on turn 1. But the fact is you can, and just toss him on the back and then wait for him to grow. I think a card like this shouldn't be 1 mana. This guy should not grow by himself. Absolutely not. I mean, you can already pump him up plenty, and because he's only 2 mana in 1 aspect, he can get him out. He can get himself out really early, and also should have the clause of if he has 0 energy, he's sacrificed. By the way, the new Herald of Despair completely kills him, which is hilarious. And the Dominion one just needs a redesign. I'm not sure how. I like the idea of working with mana crystals, but I don't know. It can't be such a big creature. It's ridiculous. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what though. But again, keep the mana crystals theme. Keep the Dominion level, but not this way. It has to be manageable. It can't just grow infinitely. I don't know. I'm sure the devs will change this up because they already mentioned that they are going to see how this meta falls out. And I can guarantee you this card is going to get bitched at by everyone if it hasn't been already. Anyways, that's enough rambling from me. There have been a few other changes that I didn't go over that are not related to the cards, such as Divine Offering now looks at the top 5 instead of 4, which is a nice change. It means you'll get screwed less often. And also here you see you have an inventory tab now and a crafting tab, which you didn't before. And the hero cards are now in your collection. That's cool. And there have been some changes to... Oh yeah, actually... I forgot to say. There's a quick unbind now. It went away. Yeah, there you go. You can unbind everything now, which is really nice. Yeah, okay, yeah, thanks. So, that's nice. And also, Marketplace has some new stuff. Boltor is going to be covering this in detail, if he hasn't already, so I'm going to let him do that. Anyways, thanks for sticking around. This has been a long video. I hope I didn't bore you too much, and we're looking forward to just experiencing this new meta, seeing what's up. Yeah. Anyways, thanks for sticking around, and have yourselves the best day possible.